Well, welcome to the Entheogenic Explorer podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Mindscape Psychedelic Institute, a leader in online psychedelic education. At Mindscape, we're dedicated to providing the highest quality psychedelic education to people all over the world, regardless of their income, which we're extremely proud of, by the way. Our comprehensive curriculum includes foundational courses, master classes, live sessions, discounted coaching, and legal guidance, all really just taught by experienced therapists and psychedelic facilitators. So love you to join us. We've got a beautiful community of facilitators, therapists, and medicine makers, and would love to have you on this transformative journey with us. So that's the introduction. I wanted to welcome Sarah Knapik to our podcast today. We have just had some really good prior conversations to starting this. I wish a lot of it was recorded, but we will get to that. But let me let Sarah introduce herself and we'll go from there.
Hello, thank you so much, Kirby, for having me here on the show. I'm excited to be here today. Yeah, I think we're just drawn together. I think we have a really similar path of both being facilitators and just helping people discover who they truly are underneath all the baggage, the limiting beliefs, the programs, the patterns. I help women heal from the inside out. So going back to childhood trauma and really seeing how that's carrying into their adulthood and shaping the way that they live their life and see their reality today. Because once we can really clear it through some of our baggage and our limiting beliefs, we get to open up to this beautiful world where everything is flowing and everything already exists. And we find it by finding it inside of ourselves first. And then by the laws of the universe, it creates our reality for us. So the toad has been a beautiful tool to help me understand all that. And that is what I help my clients do.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, again, I got the benefit of speaking to you a little bit before we started, but if you could just take a few minutes and just share your backstory. How did you get to where you are today? Who were you before all this, and who are you now?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this story could go on a long time, but I will try to edit it down. It's been about 6.5 years that I've been on this path, and it started with, I was married, I had 2 kids. I was living like, I call it like the programmed life. Like I had the house, I had the dog, and I was deeply unhappy. And I didn't understand why I wasn't happy. Like I was sold that this was the key to happiness. And ignoring my intuition, I had gone on antidepressants and then abruptly tapered off at one point. I had a nervous breakdown. And in this nervous breakdown, I told my then husband, like, take me to a psych ward. Like, lost my mind. And I ended up getting in the bath and had this rebirth moment where I felt myself for the first time, I think, ever in this lifetime. And in that moment, a very loud voice came in and said, I want a divorce. And I didn't have like any money of my own. I was teaching yoga part-time. I just had no idea what that meant or how to do it. And as I was talking, trying to convince my husband to divorce me, I did say like, this marriage isn't making me happy. And he said, it's not this marriage's job to make you happy. You are supposed to make yourself happy. And I didn't even know what that even meant at the time. I had no relationship to spirit or God. I was not meditating yet. But I had booked my very first meditation retreat, a self-love meditation retreat, about 4 months after that awakening in the bath, as we were agreeing to split. And I started to learn like presence for the first time. I'd never meditated, but like everything started to relax and I just felt really good. And I was in this art barn and there was a beautiful like wreath frame there. And I decided to spend a couple days making this wreath because the place I was staying was on the Big Sur coast and it had like flowers and succulents and like amazing gardens. And I built this beautiful wreath. And the whole time I was like, this wreath is going to go on the front door of my new home. That was like my thing. Like, how am I going to get a home for me and my kids? Like, I didn't know how because like the money just wasn't readily available. And so I was like manifesting, but I didn't know it because I kept like, this wreath is going on the front door. But the wreath was so stunning. Everybody asked me to hold it for photographs and was like, are you here to teach a workshop? But for me, it was just symbolic because I'm like, this is coming with me to a new home. And I came home and I kind of went back into my same scenario of like, what do I do? How do I get out? I don't have any money. I feel trapped. Like, I don't know what to do. And there was like this moment when I realized like I did have an IRA and that there was money in there. So I got back on Craigslist and there was the house and I just knew it. And I live in the Bay Area and it's so like the housing market's overwhelming here. So I emailed them, I told them my scenario, and they like never showed anyone the house. They said they had like 100 applicants. I went and met them, and like I had no job, no income, like who was going to rent to me? But they did. And it was like the very first of many miracles that started rolling out. And I went to my then husband and I was like, I found this house for me and the boys. And he's like, here's 7K my mom gave me today for the down payment and first month's rent. And that was like my very first, like, this is how God works feeling of I have to keep following my intuition. And like in this process of leaving my home and my family and being so scared and having no money, and like, I don't know that I had really ever made a decision on my own up to this point. I'd always asked my dad, I'd asked my husband, like, I just wasn't that woman yet. I got like the second voice come through my head, and it was like, your work in this world is going to be to teach women how to trust themselves. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like, because I was taking such a big leap of faith, like people could barely watch me do it. They didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. Um, so anyways, I got the house, gave me the 7K. I'm moving. I put the wreath on the front door. Everything was died except for the succulents. And that gave me an idea to open up a succulent design business that I ran for 4 years and shipped them all over the US. And that supported me and my boys. And that was the way that the money came in. So that like just was like the beginning of showing me like, look, if you take a step, God meets you there, but you have to go first. You have to listen to your heart. You have to keep going and like in the present moment, allow the things to unfold naturally for you. So that's a lot of what I teach women now is that's the way that it goes. It's like your path has literally never been walked before. It's on faith and intuition that it will turn out for you. But that was when I started getting into healing and went to my first ayahuasca ceremony. And then I deeply got into Wachuma and ended up being a part of a Wachuma church here, the president of a Wachuma church, and holding ceremonies. And along this, that was for a couple of years. I ended up meeting the toad at some point. And I think like a lot of people who the first time they do the toad have that feeling of like, I feel like I'm supposed to serve this medicine, but I was not even close to being the person to serve a medicine at this point. Like I was still deeply healing all my stuff from my marriage and my patterns and like in therapy and like really deep in the healing and traveling around the world, going to different medicine ceremonies. I was all in. And then, yeah, me and the toad just kind of kept a couple-year journey going. And there was a certain point that I was like, I'm gonna go learn how to serve it. But it both, yeah, the medicines changed my life. They helped me understand that God was not outside of me and that I was God and God was me. And that blew my mind.
Yeah, one of the part that resonates with me, and again, one of the reasons I think that we connect so well is just that initial story, in the sense of, your first experience. And again, as we kind of shared, I teach a class on facilitating 5-MeO. One of the first questions that I ask the participants to consider is, why do you want to do this? If the answer can't be because I want to help people. So if we take that answer off the table, right, why would you want to serve this? Because that's the easy go-to answer, right? It's like, oh, I want to help people. And at the conference last week, said the same thing. And I was like, we all walked past 3 homeless people here. Did you help them? Right.
Mhm.
So, why do you truly want to do this? And similar to you, similar on some levels, my first experience, I wasn't thinking facilitate this. I was like, holy crud, what just happened to me? But the more and more I got involved in it and started having a slight interest in it, it was still like, you're not in any place to be facilitating medicine to people. And so I always have that always appeals to me when I hear that in people's stories, right? Because it's absolutely common for you to have these extremely impactful experiences and say, I want other people to have this and I'm going to do it. But I remember being at a training once and I just did a full dose. And I remember coming out of it and there's a group of like 20 people training. And I'm like, why do you want to serve this medicine? Right? This is such a big deal. And it just is a big deal. So I appreciate that you took some time similar to like just create a better version of yourself, because it is such an energetic medicine, and how you're showing up in the space is going to impact others. And if it's ego related, That's just not really the best way to kind of show up for it. Can you share a little bit about your Wachuma experience? And for people that don't know what Wachuma is, even I know I like that term. It's more indigenous versus how the name's been reconstructed. But talk a little bit about it, that if you can. I'm curious.
Yeah, that medicine is super dear to my heart as well. It's San Pedro, it's the cactus. It's actually growing all around where I live. Like you can get it everywhere. These cactuses aren't as potent because they've been, transported from, like, one woman, I picked her cactus, and like her family brought them from Texas like 30 years ago, and I made a bunch of medicine and it was not very potent. But we do work with a lot of the powder that does come over from Peru. But yeah, Wachuma for me has been a sweet heart opening medicine. It's always given me that crystal clear clarity of seeing things from a fresh perspective. It's very long. It's very long, many, 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 many hours, day long, sometimes into the night. It can be very challenging to sleep afterwards, but it shows things from a different perspective. And I feel like it softens everything up. Like it brings in the love. And I've worked a lot with that medicine. I loved to also just I loved the role that I was given in like getting to help lead and sing. And it was so fun for me. That teacher really helped bring me up, I would say, like in the medicine way, even though I've ended up ditching that full ego anyway. But it was actually Wachuma that taught me first that I was
Mm.
God and God was me. It was like the night before, it was our last Wachuma ceremony before I left for my toad facilitator training that Wachuma taught me that. And it gave me this imagery. It's actually a tattoo on my back, which is my logo. And it was like my first ever tattoo. It's two serpents that are a heart, and they're like perfectly direct reflections of each other, because exactly as we are is exactly as our universe will be presented to us. We are creating our own reality, and that God speaks to me through my heart, and that is where I can listen. So,
Love that. Yeah,
yeah.
Wachuma is interesting, and I relate my first experience. I mean, I did a good amount of it, and it just didn't feel like everything that I had read about. So obviously, going into medicine space with expectations isn't your best move, but I had expectations, right? I'm human,
Yep.
and all my friends that were a little bit farther down the rabbit hole with it were like, it's just not the same as you can get abroad. It's not the same as Peru. It's just not. It's just a weaker version. But
And
that's what I heard anyway, and that's how I felt. But
have you done it just one time?
I've done it twice. And the second time just didn't have a really good, just made me more sick than the, the uncomfortableness was really taken away from the enjoyment of it. But I've got it. I shouldn't say, yeah, I've got some. I've been trying to find, like you said, it's a 10-hour experience. So just with kids, how do you get the time to get the 10 hours in? But and plus here in Iowa, we don't have perfect weather all the time. So I've been waiting for some really, really good weather. And also there's a part of me that, again, although I've worked with a number of medicines, I just don't like to, and this is just me, there's nothing wrong with other people that do it. The set and setting is still super important for me. And when I do medicines, I like to be in somebody else's space, especially somebody that has experience with it, that just, for me, just lowers any type of anxiety that I may have. So I can actually just relax and be in the space. So I like to separate myself from my normal environment and go someplace. So it's just been finding some time to go down that hole again. But I know it sounds strange to feel like you're called to something, because we are calling ourselves, but there's something about that space that again, the little bit of an experience that I had with it, I'm like, this is a good space. And not to compare it to MDMA, but again, what I'm finding in some of these heart openings, the beauty of those is, most of the psychedelic experience or entheogenic experiences people are having, even though, MDMA isn't a pathogen, but, let's not cut hairs over it. They don't always have to be hard. They don't always have to be like this shadow work or this tough journey. There's something beautiful about just a beautiful, loving experience, because I find most of the folks, and maybe similar to you, the folks that we're working with, if you say, do you love yourself? It's like,
They say
not
they'd hit
really.
know. They don't even know how to love themselves.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was me prior to getting into this work. It's like, I'm like, how can
Same.
you, and that term used to bug me even. It's like, just love yourself. And I'm like, how can I love myself when I'm saying dumb things or I'm reacting in these negative ways? What I just
Yeah.
did was kind of a jerk move. How could I love that? And it's not till you really realize it's just, my experience was just seeing all the programming. It's like, oh, you're doing the best you can, man. You're 51. You've got 51 years of programming like embedded in you. And you think, in the course of a weekend, that programming is just going to go away, even though you intellectually know that it's wrong or you can see it differently. Until you can see that programming and get in there and start adjusting it, it is a portion of you. But realizing that it wasn't my fault, and I'm not one to kind of push blame on anybody else either, but it's like we are these programmed versions of our reality. And then once you can see that, it's like you can start having more compassion for the way that you've shown up, if that makes any sense.
I mean, you nailed it. That's what I tell my clients all the time, because when we're reacting from our programming, then we go into spirals of shame and blame and like not liking ourselves. And I'm always like, you're learning, like approach yourself with love and compassion. If we think of ourselves like we're just an energetic being, like we want to feel love all the time. So even when we're learning, how can we approach ourselves with that softness? It's the awareness that actually is what's needed, because when you see that you're still in your pattern or your program, we can't heal it by being mean to ourselves. We're perpetuating the program at
Right.
that point. I learned that at one point. I'm like, whoa, wait, me treating myself is the way that I was treated as a child that I'm healing from. Like that's how deep the program is. It's so sneaky. You don't even notice that it's happening. And then another point I wanted to mention is like, yes, we see it in the ceremony and it gives us our synopsis of like what we're working with. And then when we step out back into our life, that's the integration. So when we're seeing now show up the pattern, the program in everyday life, is the moment that we learn how to be gentle, soft, and sweet. Now we're integrating what the medicine showed us in real time in our daily life as it happens. And that reprograms us for the next time that it happens. And then every time it starts to get a little bit more softer, more loving, more gentle.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. It's, again, maybe not a great analogy, but I've been down this rabbit hole of especially after, well, any experience, but let's just say a 5-MeO experience or any experience. For me, my 5-MeO experience, kind of, I called it like the Bufo glasses. Like it just changed how I saw reality on some level. And it actually magnified all the eye experiences I had. I'm like, oh, I can almost revisit all of those from like a different level, a different perspective. But it's like, if you just got these glasses, now you got to see reality all over again. And it's that concept of child's mind. I'm like, now you have to relearn everything that you think you learned, every experience, you have to go through this again. And that's why people are like, oh, I did an integration call.
Mm-mm.
Yes. But real integration to me is again just almost reliving reality through this different lens and seeing your programming like, oh, that's how I used to respond to things. Or, oh, I responded that way like I used to in the past. That's okay. It's like retraining the brain to like, okay, and what you find is that standard deviation of reaction just starts shortening and shortening and shortening, where now sometimes I'll just have the thought, but I'm not having the reaction to it. And you're like, oh, that's where it goes. So it
That's
just
what
takes
I'm at
time.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why we have to approach ourselves with love and compassion. We're relearning as an adult. Otherwise, we're carrying all of our childhood stuff and we're like little toddlers running around. But we have to find a new way to do that, because the old way is what brought us to the medicine in the first place.
Yeah, no, I love
Yeah.
that you said that. Again, the way we're handling ourselves is the way that we were essentially handled that created the problem to begin with.
Yeah, I had that realization recently. I like went in and, we heal these things. We think it feels like so many times sometimes, especially some specific things from childhood, but this like one incident from childhood came back up in the last couple months as I'm sure you know this too. When you go to teach something, sometimes you have to go through it again on your own. There's like an initiation process. So I was teaching this course and there was a whole childhood childhood model of like going back in to heal our inner child. And like my inner child stuff started coming back up. And I'm like, huh, what is going, like, this is deep. And I saw the connection to my body. I saw the connection to like one of my deepest, like, things I've been working with, which was like safety, and like going all the way back to this one incident that like changed my whole perception till this point of my life, and how it has shaped everything. And that is when I saw like the voice of like the person who was in this incident, that was how I had actually been treating myself. Like it ingrained on so many levels. And that was when I noticed, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I never want to talk to you that way. Like, I'm so sorry. And it's helped me shift my perspective so much to just, honestly, to just be happy and enjoy my life in a way I never have before. Like nothing's wrong. I'm like right where I'm supposed to be. Everything's perfect. I don't need to judge or criticize where I'm at, where I want to be. And yeah, the beautiful miracle happens when we just stop and say, I'm just going to be happy now. I don't have to wait for blah, blah to happen, this to happen. It's a choice.
Yeah, and I think and again, just my opinion on it, it's like this the word even happiness has been corrupt is not the right word, but I think misinterpreted for at least for me. And happiness was always supposed to be, yay, everything's exciting and woohoo, like that super feeling that we would associate with super happiness. And happiness started shifting to me to just to be contented. Like I'm okay right here and now. I don't need anything more. This is fine, right? But I think we've created a culture through social media and just again, a lot of the input people are getting that like they're supposed to be like smiley, giddy, super happy all the time, and that's happiness. Maybe it's a form of happiness, it's a version of happiness, but to me, happiness just became being content with exactly what is of like this just is. So like you said, it's a choice. I could be angry about what is, I could be frustrated about what is, I could be sad about what is, but it doesn't change what is. So it seems like a pretty easy decision. Nothing, the physical reality is not going to change. So be miserable about it or be content and accept what it is. And through that acceptance and that contentedness, I found happiness, if that makes any sense.
It does. I feel like that was a big part of my self-love journey, was starting with self-acceptance of like, okay, what are the parts of myself I'm not accepting? Let me look at them, physical, emotional, whatever they are. And like, how can I learn to love them anyway? Because there are what they are if I can't actually change them, and accepting that helped open up a lot more love for me. And I think even as I've grown my business, or like I'm at where I'm at in my life, like if I'm always trying to be, ahead, and I'm here, I'll never get to experience that contentment or that happiness. And things really started to shift for me when I realized like, and I know this, but sometimes you just need to be reminded like there's no other freaking time that exists. We're in this eternal moment of just now. So you can't say I'll be happy when, or I'll feel this when this comes. It just doesn't work that way. Like we already have everything. It's just be happy now and let the things do what they may. So that's been a bigger like growth for me recently, just having some things in my life that I would have been freaking out about like a couple of years ago, and like in a ton of fear and discontent and like stress. And I'm just like, I'm just not. I'm like, it's gonna be fine. Like God's got me. And my job is to just go inside and cultivate this feeling and let my nervous system calm down, remind myself I'm safe, that everything truly is okay.
Yeah, I think so that I think that's one of the on multiple levels, but one of the most important parts of the work that you're doing and that I'm trying to do at least is that awareness. Like everybody knows there's only one moment, which is now. Everybody knows that on an intellectual level, right? But it's not till folks can embody that. And again, we're in a day and age where nobody is here. Everybody's like somewhere else on their phone or thinking about what they should or need to do or what's next or what's already happened in that and none of that is real. but your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and what it's imagining. I mean, a drill I love to do with folks is I'll have them do just a brief meditation and then visualize biting into a lemon, like peel the
I
lemon.
love that. The whole
Yeah.
mouth gets sour. I do that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like there you go. So your mind didn't know the difference between a real lemon and then you visualizing it. So what do you think you're doing to yourself by imagining that difficult phone call on Monday, on Friday, right? Like your whole weekend is going to be replaying this moment that hasn't even happened yet, but your body is feeling it. It's remembering that you're ingraining it into you, and it's creating a tremendous amount of suffering. And so the way people are avoiding that is again through dopamine hits from their phones or other things versus can you just be? Can you just be? Not be anything, not try to be, just literally just be. And so if you can get folks into that space and help them, again, not intellectualize it, but actually embody it, it can really start making some impact because if you can't be, then the rest of the work is very difficult.
And the only way to be is an action-based step here or a non-action-based step. And this has been my deepest work this year is just like embodiment. Like I get it. I understand every concept at this point. I know it. I want to feel it in my body. I want to be it. I want it to be the way I am all the time. And I have been embodying more and more. And that's why like things do feel so good now, despite what's going on. That is what the embodiment is. And that person who is worrying from Friday to Monday, like on an energetic level, they're just creating that experience for themselves to go the way that their mind is rehearsing it because God knows what we're thinking, feeling, saying before it comes out of our mouth. It's already in creation process because the thought creates the feeling in the body and that's what creates energy. Then it creates the vibration and then the law of attraction comes in and then it happens. So this is what I'm working a lot with my clients and a piece that came in later for me after all my work with the toad, because it was the toad that taught me this, right? Like it's only the present. Like everyone's carrying their stuff from the past. We have to go back and heal it. We have to forgive. We have to accept. We have to take responsibility. There's a process to get through that. And then like we can't be so far ahead, like we're missing now. But the piece that came in later that kind of made all of my toad, and I don't know, revelations like sink in a little bit more is like we actually get to create what we want with our minds if it's in alignment. Like it still needs to be in alignment with what God wants for us, but we do have this beautiful power within us to show creator what we do want instead of what we don't want. So I do work with my clients a lot to help them understand and see that like you're creating all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. Like we are all little creators. This is all the energy does is create, 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 create. Like good or bad, it doesn't decipher. It's the way the laws work. It's going to create. So like, let's learn how to tap out of the fear-based mind system that's programmed that we grew up with and learn how to come into the present moment, relax, and then use this energy to show creator actually what we want by being it now. That's where the embodiment piece comes in, because then naturally through the laws, then we create what we are, what we want. Not what we
Yeah,
want, what we believe in, what we are.
right. And I think that's an interesting piece too. It's like, and that's where I relate. I think a lot of people, and again, it goes back to the integration concept or, again, a lot of folks that we're working with to train, it's like, it takes time and I could teach you to light a pipe in 15 minutes, right? Give me a monkey and a dozen bananas. I could teach you to put flame to a pipe. That's not it, right? It's understanding what's happening and really how to embody it. And, it's like you are what you think with your thoughts, you create your world. I mean, like that's been around forever, but people don't understand the depth of that on the level that you just laid it out, is we are creating constantly. You are what you're thinking. And I love Joe Dispenza, and he's like, you have 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of those thoughts are the same thoughts that you had yesterday, which are the same thoughts that you had the day before. And you're just trapped in this cycle of repeating and thinking the same things over and over again. And that's why for me, with some folks that we work with, it's like just even simple pattern differences. Well, what do you drink? You drink coffee in the morning? Let's switch to tea. Let's change that whole routine. How do you go to work? let's find a different route today. Let's just start making, it sounds silly to people, but I'm like, you're starting to make different
Uh-huh.
adjustments and break this pattern of this is what I do and this is how I do it. And I just think that's super powerful. But the embodying piece, like I said, a lot of people intellectually understand these things, right? Especially a lot of people in the spiritual community. It's like, we're one with everything. And I'm like, if we were, okay, which I think that we are, and if you truly believe that and embody that, why are you making fun of this person? Or why are you posting this? Or why do you
Never.
feel like this deep need to be seen as more than others, right? Which is interesting. I pick on the spiritual community a little bit, even though anything I pick on, I'm sure I was a part of at some stage and maybe still
Totally.
I'm far
Yeah.
from perfect. But that's what I love your journey. You mentioned earlier is, as you started having experiences with the toad, which was same as me, first it's like one level of awareness, and then that level of awareness starts shifting. Every time I do it, I guess I'll summarize. Now, every time I do it, I'm like, you are a clown. And in a beautiful way, it's like all that is useful, all that is non-necessary. None of that is necessary. All of these extra pieces are just fluff. It's very simple. And yeah, there's some simplification to it for me. And it was just truly embodying that of like, okay, if that's what it is, then why are we doing all of this? And so I could see that in some of the facilitation, especially here in the West, where the titles are important, the outfits are super important, the props are important. And I'm like, good for you. I'm not going to critique or criticize that. But for me, it's not important anymore. It's source doesn't care about that. It's very simple, actually, almost too simple that it's complicated on some levels, but it's actually really simple.
Yeah. I love that you said that. And I shared this a little bit with you earlier, but I want to share it again of just, when I came home last year from Mexico for my second time of visiting my teacher, I was in this embodiment process, and it was like all these. I feel like I just get communicated through voices a lot. It's like, take this money out of your bank, go give this person money. And it was like giving out money to the homeless, sending me up streets to pick up trash. I'm like, what is going on? Like, making me go drive different ways, go on a trail I'd never been on. I say making me, but like I always listen. So I usually listen. So I'm like, what? I feel like a monkey. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but like I'm being asked to do all these things I'd never done. And I was like, I think I was just being shown like this is how you embody. This is how we use you. Like, you want this prayer with us? Like, okay, then show us that you want it. Like, and that was when I was leaving for Mexico that I thought that trip was going to be this, like, yeah, coming together of being led on my intuition. Or that was my trip to Peru, sorry, of being led on my intuition. But um it was in that time that I gave away all my medicine woman stuff, and I had come home and cleaned my whole altar off, and I took it down to, like, I think just a white heart and a candle, because I learned on that trip, like, I don't need anything to connect to God. I don't need to wear these Shipibo dresses to serve medicine. Do I look so cute with these beads on and this dress? Yes. Does it fit the part? Of course. Is my altar gorgeous? It's amazing. But I just gave it all away, and I left a whole identity, and it broke up a lot of friendships. People couldn't watch me do it. They were very frustrated and annoyed with me. A sacred pipe called a chanupa that was gifted to me, like lots of beautiful sacred items. And I made sure they went to the right home, of course. Like, you don't just drop that stuff off at Goodwill. Eagle fans, owl fans, like all of the things I had built years of this identity. And then I gave it all away. And now it's so interesting because it's just, there's tiny little pieces of it in my house. But what I've really learned, and this is the embodiment piece, was on the medicine, I don't need to show off with this dress or these beads or anything. And it was sad, some of the friendships that broke up because of this choice that I made of kind of walking away from this part of the medicine path. But That's okay, because I'm on the path that I'm on, and that path was being in my own heart and embodiment and living in my own prayer.
Well,
So
that's what I love about you, to be honest. I know we're just meeting each other, but again, that's where I relate to you is, again, especially as you start the medicine work, there's a projection and an expectation of what you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to look, how you're like the whole show of it. But the more work you do, or at least for me anyway, the more work that I did and the more I embodied it, I'm like, you don't need any of this. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm like, it's not going to change the experience. It may change the immediate when they first walk into the space, or like, where's all the pretty stuff? But if they get it, they'll get it. And when they'll get it, they're like, this is all absolutely unnecessary. And that's not to, I've got some amazing friends that are like, to me, the highest level facilitators. There's very few people I would sit with. These people I would absolutely sit with. But the ceremony part of it and the lead up to it is very important to them. And I honor all that, right? That absolutely, that's for you. And I've kind of gone the other direction. I was like, let me show you what I do. It's like 5 minutes. We'll do a little sage, even though it's not the sage doing anything, in my opinion. You are the medicine. So I will burn the sage. I think, yeah, medicinally has some properties to it. But if I'm burning sage and you're thinking of negative shit, it's still not helpful. It's like, you are the one. So what are your intentions? What are your thoughts? So on some level, I think the the props can shift people that don't know quite yet into a more aligned energetic space. But for me, it's not for me. It's like, I don't need this. It just is what it is. Maybe I worded that poorly, but I think I kind of think you get what I'm going with that.
I
Uh,
understand what you're saying. I mean, I love things beautiful. I love a beautiful altar, and I can have a beautiful altar if I want to have it, but not because I think I need the altar.
yes, yes,
And that
perfectly said.
that right there is really for everything.
Yes,
We can
yeah,
want it, but we can't want it from a place of we think we need it to serve, because what we need to serve is a clear mind to know what God wants us to do in the exact moment. That's the most important thing. It's
agreed.
not the tools on the altar. Like, yes, we want to have a couple tools, but and for anybody who's like interested in going to a medicine ceremony and they're not sure who they want to sit with, like, feel what their energy feels like to the best of your ability that you can, is my recommendation. And like, I had this imagery while you're talking of like a one medicine person in like the whole getup and all the gear, which is beautiful. It is. I love it. And then one really simple, but like if you go up close to them and you just feel both of their energy and your eyes are closed and you never get to see what anybody's wearing, who do you choose?
Yeah, that's a great, and again, not to, even when I was a little bit more, even when I had more props, to me, I realized that that was just a character that I was playing, and that's okay too, right? It's not just having it's not just having these things that to me would say, kind of borderline. It's, are you attached to those in the sense that you think that they are who you really are? Like, I'm just a guy playing a medicine person. At the end of the day, I'm just Kirby. I'm playing a medicine person. You're playing engineer. You're playing CPA, right? We're all playing these avatars in the world. And I was like, I just have a cool one, right? That I really enjoy, that I feel that feels fun. But I'm not that it. It doesn't make me anything. It's just the avatar. And so the avatar for years was for other people's benefit. And then after a while, I'm like, I don't feel, no, good luck. That's just not I'm not going to be the avatar for you either. I'm just not going to be the avatar. And so if that's not in alignment with you, that's perfectly okay. And I think that's the difference where you and I are in a lot of alignment. Like, I don't care if I serve or not. It's not an identity to me. It's not how I make a living. I don't need to do it. I don't want to be seen as that. I'm like, I bring a lot more to the world, I like to think, than just the ability to serve medicine. And I think similar to you, as I started stepping away from that, there was just a ton of projections of like, well, you're supposed to be like this, or you're supposed to be perfect, or you're not supposed to ever use a foul word, it's like I could imagine when I was going back to church, the way that you would view the pastor, right? Like, Imagine if you found out later that he got in an argument with his wife, you're like, oh my God, I thought he had it all figured out. It's like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of projections that I think are put on facilitators. And if you're wearing all this baggage, right, which a lot of them are, and I felt that going into an IS ceremony once, and I shared with you, like, there's going to be another shaman here. And I was like, good for him. He's the one lugging all that stuff into the space of having to be these things. I think that's where it can get a little bit tricky. And to be able to shed all of that of, like, not to make it about me, but I've got all the shirts I have are exactly the same. They're just different colors. All the pants I have are the exact same pants. They're just different colors. So I put no thought into what I'm wearing. Like, am I going to my daughter's play? I'm wearing that. If I'm going to an event, I'm wearing, like, there's no thought now into, how do people want to see me, or how do I want to show up for other people? So the more and more you can embody this understanding of oneness, it's a lot of things start feeling silly to me. That's it. So regardless if you're facilitating, that's not to trigger. Have your props, have your show. That's all beautiful. It's the attachment to that, or thinking that that is you, that I'm like, not, that's just not for me personally. That's it. Um, Question for you, because you brought it up a couple times.
Okay.
God,
Yes.
what is God to you? Right. So who is leading Sarah? Like, who is God to you?
Yeah. I love to talk about God. It's such a big question. For me, God is a universal energy that is everything and everyone, and it's running through me, it's running through you, it's the computer, it's the phone, it's everything that's in existence at the same moment. And it already is everything, it already has everything, it loves itself fully, and it's already whole. That's why it doesn't judge itself, it doesn't criticize itself. It treats everything with love because everything is itself, and I'm that, you're that, we're all that. So that is what I do my best to embody. And that's what I try to teach people of what they are, and that what's in the way of that is the programmed mind and the limiting beliefs.
Perfect. That was so beautifully stated. So when you feel called to things, or you're listening to this voice, right, that you call God,
Which is, I call God, but this, I trip myself up sometimes because then I notice I'll put a separation and I'm like, wait a second. Because when you get this, like when you get to that level of self-awareness, you almost becomes like this little like game with yourself sometimes. I don't know if you have that experience,
yes.
but that's a great example of it. Yeah, the voice in my head.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And again, this is where people that are looking for a facilitator or looking for somebody to listen to, anybody that says that they know the answer, that would just be cautious, right? I think I know some things, but they're just my experiences. I mean, ultimately, you know, reincarnation, maybe. Past lives, maybe. All feels right to me, feels organic to
Yeah.
me, but I can't tell you that is the nature of reality. Maybe you know the nature of reality, but it's just my internal belief system with it. But I've always felt, and we've talked about Martin a little bit, you know, to him, it's like there's just one of everything. And I'm in agreement, but there's still a part of me, and this is kind of my own inner dialogue sometimes, questioning it, because not questioning it, but I feel like, yes, I am God. So if God's the ocean, I still feel like a drop of water in the ocean, right? Like there feels like not a separation, or I could say I feel like I'm on the finger on the hand of God, right? Like
Mm.
I am
And Martin
everything.
would say you're the hand.
He would say you're the hand, and maybe he's absolutely right. And I don't disagree with anybody that feels that way either.
Right.
Um,
But
but
you
we are
both are saying the same thing, essentially.
ultimately, it's the same thing, that we are that. And I know that's triggering for some folks, especially in like the religious community. We're like, how can you say that you're God? Well, God said we were all God. You know, if you go back and you look at some of the scriptures, and I've reread them from a different lens, it's like that's exactly what's being said. Um, so ultimately, when you're praying to yourself on some
Yourself.
level as well.
It's
Um,
it's funny, like, because then once you get that awareness, you're like, you already know. So now I'm just like, just show me the most beautiful, most easeful way to this with the least resistance. Like, you already know what I'm going to say, but for the person who's never prayed yet, Yes, learn how to pray out loud. Start saying things.
Yeah, because that's again how you make it your reality. There's, I believe everything is energy. I think our thoughts are energy. The verbal word is like a spell of prayer energetically, right? So what you're putting in the world, that to me is like true level of manifestation, right? Like I jokingly saw somebody made a post a little while back, like we manifested a brand new couch. I'm like, that's awesome. Um, Maybe manifest something different than the couch,
Hey, they
but
needed the couch.
yeah, the couch is great. But it's more than just thinking about the couch. There's so much into it. It is literally, I guess where I'm going, it's the thought is a piece of it, but it is almost scripturally, like thought, word, and deed. It is like this completely embodied resonance, and then we attract what we are resonating in people. I mean, I spent a good portion of my life. I grew in a pretty hostile environment. So people were all a threat to me for most of my life, where that's just kind of the energy I carried myself with. I didn't realize that, but that's how I carried myself. And that's what impacted, that was the lens I saw everything. But I remember the first moment that it really dawned on me. Again, I just had an experience, and it was a couple days later. I was sitting on my bed, and my wife walked in the room, and I saw her as me. I'm like, wow, that literally is me in just a different physical form. And that sounds silly to people, but there's depth to that for me that I was like, oh, sheesh. We are literally the exact, and I could look at my dog and feel the same way. I'm like, we are the same. You're just playing a different character. And that's how now I can kind of walk through reality of, even if they don't know it, I'm like, you're in there, you just don't know it. You're God, you don't know it yet, but we are the same thing. The difference is I just don't believe that I'm the character that I'm walking around in the Matrix in. I know it is just a character that I've decided to wear. Even picking the same outfits, there's a level of ego in that, right? It's like, okay, this is me. This is the character that I'm choosing to show up in, because we have to show up as something, right? On some levels, but most folks are completely unaware that they're choosing this character that they are, and then they're identifying deeply with it. And when you have that attachment to these characters, to uphold that, again, it's that energetic baggage that you're walking around with. I'm Jim, the CPA. Okay, cool. That's actually just what you do. That's your work, but you're more than that. And if you could see that attachment to that identity of who you think that you are, or who you think people think you should be, it just drops. And with that comes, again, goes back to that happiness piece of like, man, it's just so much easier just to be nothing. But you have to be something. No, I can play things. I play characters all the time. But I'm just me, whatever that is. And anyhow, um, we could do 100 of these podcasts. I really enjoy
Oh my
you,
gosh, there's
and
so
I
much
mean
to
that.
talk about. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of similarities. Again, we both facilitated and then kind of stepped away from that, which I honor tremendously, because that just shows me this unattachment to that role or that character or that projection, and then stepping back into it on some level, respectfully. And yeah, it's different, where it could be a little bit more, the word intentional. That's it. It's not a need. It's something that, if you, I'm assuming, and you can correct me, that if you feel like this would be really impactful for somebody, yeah, we could have that conversation, but it's not all that I'm bringing to the table. And I'd love to hear more about what you are bringing to the table, some of the offerings that you have. And yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Um, well, just really working with women to help them lose this identity of, like we've been speaking about this whole time, of like, you're not these things, you're not your trauma, you're not the thing that happened, you're not this, you're not that, like you're underneath this really pure, beautiful love. And our work is to get into this other vibration so that we can live like a beautiful life here on earth. Like God can't offer us all the miracles that we're looking for without our mind opening up to receive the miracle. So everything starts in the mind, and it's hard. It's challenging, but once you figure that out, there's no one coming on a white horse. This was like my reality to save me. Like it was just my mind that I had to work with to make the shifts to open myself up to the life that I really wanted to live. So I help a lot of women like who are like, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I have this deeper feeling in my heart, like uncover what their purpose is, like what this thing is that they really want to do, and help them work through all their limitations to actually bring it forth into the world. So that's what I do a lot in my one-on-one coaching. And I do use the toad when it's needed with them. And that's like a little bit of a newer thing that I started doing that, and I'm seeing like really big results. And the last client, it was her first time. She was like, it took decades off of my
Sure.
healing. Like it pushed me so far. And I think that's the level of awareness of a responsibility of a facilitator, is to know, and the person who's receiving, are you capable of the responsibility that this holds, how fast it will push your life once you sit with the medicine? It will naturally all start to rearrange very quickly and try to get you into alignment as fast as it can, because it's just energy. It wants this certain order, right? But we're all blocked up. Our thoughts have just created boxes and we are stuck inside of them. So yeah, I help women clear their minds and really get into the path of their heart so they can step into the world and be the conduit that they're supposed to be for this God source universe energy. Um, that's what I'm doing with my one-on-one. And then I'm birthing out a new embodiment program, which I'm so excited about, after my long journey of embodiment. And I've been, yeah, kind of like dabbling in and out of like, what is my work with the toad? Like it won't go away. I can't, like, it's not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like it keeps coming back into my life. And it's in my heart because it really helped me understand who I am and create a path for me that I could have never imagined in a million years, 6.5 years ago. If you were like, what's going to happen? I mean, I didn't even know this existed. It changed my life completely, which has changed my kids' life. And so there's something still here for me with it. So I'm working on this 6-month group program where we're going to meet every week, and I'm going to teach them everything I know from the beginning of my journey to where I'm at, that keeps, embodying and going, of our minds, and how do we heal, and what is God, and how do we shift, and how do we embody, and how do we manifest as well in an intentional, aligned way where it's with God and not for the ego. And that's going to be broken up to 3 months with a toad ceremony in Mexico in the middle, and then 3 months. So this is me kind of bringing the toad back in a way that I have not brought it back in a while. That feels like I'm being asked to do. I'm asking myself. And I wanted to have it in Mexico because I want it to feel good and legal and clean, and something I can speak about on my Instagram, something I can talk about confidently and not have that energy being held over me of I shouldn't be doing this, which I don't like that energy. It doesn't feel good to me. Um, so yeah, it's called Devotion, and it's for the path of embodying the divine within.
Well, I think again, for anybody listening, I talk to a lot of facilitators, I talk to a lot of coaches, I talk to a lot of folks. And if you didn't hear this conversation the way that I heard it, go re-listen to it, in the sense that it's all about the ego and how we show up, and all these pieces that, again, that people could intellectually understand. But when you do what I do, and you know the people that are actually doing it and are embodying it, and we've used that word a bunch, but it really is, how are you literally showing up? And there's a disease in this world right now of being special, and being
Oh
seen.
yeah, I know
And
that one. That was me.
me too, right? It's like, 'cause we know, and again, and it comes from a good place usually. It's like we would have these experiences, and I'm like, I feel like I know something on some level that I really want to share with you, right? And that creates a level of separation, almost like I'm feeding you. And now I just kind of imagine, like, the analogy I use a lot is from like Lady and the Tramp, when they're eating that same plate of spaghetti, and it's like one noodle. It's like serving and server. There's no difference. We are the
There's
same,
no difference.
and there's no levels to it that I know more than you. It's just like I've got experiences that I could share with you, but that doesn't make me special. That doesn't make me more than you. And so that's a rarity, right? It's a rarity. And so to find somebody that actually is truly that, and I can say that about you, and I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I'm pretty good at ascertaining these things.
Feel it because it's energy. Yeah. Well, I
It's
do want to share my first, I'm just going to add this in, my first time going to Mexico to work with my teacher. I said, I'm seeing this weird energy in me. Like, I didn't get like the validation and love I wanted from my dad. And it led me to this weird behavior for the rest of my life. I was like, what's the healing? And his answer blew my mind. It was like, to be yourself. I
simple.
was like, it's so simple. And that was what the toad taught me. Like I knew I was drawn to the toad. I couldn't understand why. And that first time in Mexico working with him the way that I did, I was like, oh, the toad is to help women understand and be their authentic self underneath all the masks, the illusions, the programming, the limiting beliefs. Like, wow, my mind was like, and there was one other moment on that journey I want to share because every time I did the medicine, it rained. Like just me, no one else, but it kept raining and raining and raining. And finally, my teacher came up. He's like, something's up with the rain in you. God is crying. And I'm like,
Mm.
huh. So I'm reading the Course in Miracles, and I think we had done like a little micro mushroom dose that day, mushroom microdose that day. And I had an epiphany and I was like, I know why God is crying. And I run up to my teacher and I'm like, I know why God's crying. And I'm like, because I don't love myself yet. Yeah. And he was like, that if you don't love yourself, you don't love God.
I love
Yeah.
that. Well, I'd say again, your last offer was seems as something we both facilitated the medicine, and the question's always to me like, what's the ideal use of this? Because it is life-changing and extremely powerful and so healing. I meditated for years. I didn't quite get what I was doing until I had that experience, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah. It
that's
gives you
what
an anchor point after,
yes,
like, yeah, well, you know what you're looking for. And I do want to
yes,
say not everybody's gonna get that on one time,
for
two
sure.
times, 3 times as well. It depends what you're working through.
For sure. That's a great point. And again, not to discredit any like I call it the traveling circus, folks that kind of show up, facilitate medicine, and they're gone. I got healing that way. I know thousands
Mhm.
of people that have got healing that way. That's how I started originally. So I understand that. But now I can see ideally, or at least in my mind, ideally, how we're using this is how you mentioned it. It's all the upfront work of leading up to that experience. It's in having those experiences, and in many cases, multiple experiences. I think first time you're like, I don't know what happened to me, but something happened. It's like learning to drive a car. Like after you've driven it, if you're like, okay, you know how to use it a little bit better. It's like a tool, right? So now you're better at using this tool, but then
Right.
having more time afterward. So I stopped like I'll facilitate this experience too. Now we're going to meet at least 3 or 4 times in advance, work up to that
Yes.
experience. Then if the experience feels right, we can do that. And then we're going to meet 4 or 5 times afterwards. And even that could be better in the sense of I like how you've got it a little bit more spread out because once you've got that experience, it takes, you may again have those intellectual insights. Okay, I'm everything. You got to go live that. You have to embody that. And that just takes time. And so to have it in
Yeah.
a container that you're offering with your guidance, it's like if you're trying to get in better shape, you go to a personal trainer, right? It's not like you can't go to the
Yeah.
gym on your own, but like you go to somebody that knows or has done this and kind of walked this path. They know a little bit. They can help speed this process up, keep you from
And
getting
it's
tripped up,
hard.
and guide you a little
Yeah.
bit. So I highly recommend people look you up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like this is more of the in alignment way of serving now that was never available when I started with the medicine.
Yeah.
I never had integration. I look back at the ceremonies, the messages, the things that came through that they never got integrated. So how could I embody when I didn't even know how to integrate? So now that there are teachers who have learned how to do it on their own, yeah, we want to learn from them because it's not offered and a lot of people don't know how to do it yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited for this. And I think for me, there was a lot of fear and insecurity and concern of judgment and tons of stuff wrapped up in this decision of this program getting birthed out, of my being, of like, yes, this is what wants to come through next because this is medicine, and everyone has their opinion and how you're doing it and this and that. And I'm just like, you know what? Like, I just have to stay in myself with God and in what I think is right and walk that way and let everything else go. So, yeah, staying true on our own path. And we can't for us to walk the path we want and be in our mission, like literally, we can't give a fuck what other people think about us. Like, sorry to just drop that language like that, but like, that's been a huge thing for me is like at some point you have to say it doesn't matter because it's your projections on me and I have to live what my heart is asking me to do. So
Yeah,
um,
that's
I'm
perfect.
excited. The place in Mexico is amazing. And yeah, I'm starting to think of like, oh, who's gonna come and who's gonna be the co-facilitator and like, yeah. So I think I'm gonna open this up to 10 women to go on this journey for 6 months together and know they'll all be perfectly aligned. And I do hold a prayer in my heart. Like I'm I'm the person when the woman is ready, she finds me. She's not at the beginning of the journey. She's already done some work. She's stuck. She can't quite get there. Like she's ready. She has the mission in her heart, but she just needs like that, like a last push through. I feel like that was me when I came to this medicine. So calling in that woman.
I love it. Well, I really enjoyed having you. Again, I honestly would, and I don't say this with everybody, I'd love to have you again. We got so much more that I want to go down some rabbit
Gosh,
holes with you. But
I would
for
love
folks
to
that
too.
are interested, yeah, I will put Sarah's information in the connection to this, the description, so it'll be easy to find her. And I would recommend reaching out again if this is the space that you're at. And I don't say this for everybody, so I want to keep saying that it's like this feels right to me. It feels like the right direction to go. You feel absolutely right to me. And again, I talk to a lot of people, and not that they don't feel right, but this feels absolutely right. And I love the way that you're working with this medicine and the intentionality behind it and what you're bringing to the space. So just, yeah, so thank you for being with us. And
So
yeah, I hope
much.
folks reach out.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirby.